and now listening to a Purple Crayon Productions broadcast.
You're going on a road trip. You're not sure where it will take you, just that you need to take it. You woke up one morning and looked at the sky and felt the inexplicable need to drive. And so you drove, and now you're on an interstate, following the pull of the sun and the mountains and thinking it was far too easy to just walk away. But you did. And so you drive, and as you drive you wonder what strange things are lying ahead of you. You're in a motel in South Dakota, sleeping on the first floor with the window open as the sun beats down on the plains. You feel a breeze come into the room as you get dressed and make coffee that you take outside, back to your car. You sit on the hood of the car, looking out over the flat land that you know now to hold so many mysteries. And then you check out at the front desk and return to the interstate, running through Wyoming and Montana and Idaho. You think it must be hard to work at a hotel, seeing people constantly coming and going to places that aren't here. You pass signs. Welcome to Wyoming, forever west. Welcome to Montana, big sky country. Welcome to Idaho, continental divide. These states are where the Rocky Mountains reach their peak. You drive near the continental divide in Idaho, separating the rivers flowing to the Atlantic from the rivers flowing to the Pacific. And you cross the state lines of Oregon, and you realize you've made it all the way across the country, from ocean to ocean. And as you travel further and further west, you see mountains like you've never seen them before. They're bigger, sharper, so beautiful and imposing they seem fake. They tower over springs that are bright blue, and vibrant green trees with hints of red and gold. They are green and gray, but their peaks are white with snow and vanish into the clouds. They exist in the pine trees of Washington and the ice and snow of Canada, but also near the Rio Grande and the mesas of New Mexico. They have existed for longer than you can understand and will continue to exist, past trees and people and times when rivers and rocks and places can have names. They will be the same. They will be there. And for as long as stories have existed, mountains have been constant as well. They are the focal points of Native American creation myths and the foundation of entire systems of life, of belief, of knowledge. Some stories feature powerful spirits living on top of active volcanoes, or the mountains themselves having conversations and relationships with one another. Sometimes these mountains travel from place to place on whims. They are gods, immortal beings with powers beyond our comprehension. But before the mountains were gods, they were people too. Mount Rainier is in southwest Washington and towers above fields of wildflowers, waterfalls, and hot springs. In the early summer months, some refer to it simply as paradise. In many of its origin stories, the mountain is described as a human woman who lived in the Cascades by the Columbia River. She had a son and a husband with multiple wives, and her family was cruel to her, making her feel trapped and embattled. Eventually, the woman left the crowded Olympic Mountains and went to the plains out east, where the air flowed more freely, where she could finally breathe. And as she breathed and basked in the openness of the land, she grew larger and larger. Her feet rooted themselves to the ground, and her head stretched up to the sky and the clouds. Eventually, she became stone and rock, and spread out all across the vast landscape. Today, the snow line of Mount Rainier stretches far up into the atmosphere, where it is clear and cold, and you can almost touch the stars. It's the highest point in the Cascades. The woman is finally free. Further south is Mount Hood, the highest point in Oregon and a semi-dormant volcano. It is surrounded by pine trees and thick forests, and nobody is quite sure when it will erupt again, just that someday it will. According to legend, it has existed for far longer than humans as we know them, and originated when the world was new and innocent. During this time, the beings surrounding Mount Hood were as tall as trees. One day, an evil spirit who lived on the mountain grew angry and began spewing lava and rocks from the summit. The chief, the tallest of all beings, climbed to the top of the mountain and threw rocks back at the spirit. The land where all of the tall beings lived was destroyed by this battle of stones, the world's first eruption. The other tribe members fled to the peaks of distant mountains, where they starved and grew smaller, bringing an end to the age of giants and a beginning to the age of smaller, more human-like beings. Night has fallen as you drive up and down winding roads taking you through the Cascades. All around you, you see glimpses of animals stirring, bushes rustling, calls that echo from mountain to mountain, and then you see eyes, 2, 4, 1,000, glowing in the woods next to your car. You squint and make out a pack of coyotes. They look like they know something, like they have an understanding of everything you're thinking, everything you will think. You drive past them slowly, thinking that if you move too fast, one will break out of the stillness and shatter the trance you and they seem to be in. And they stare at you, all of them, eyes golden and unblinking in the darkness. You think you've heard that coyotes hunt alone, so what are they doing, all in a group together? Coyotes are also said to be as old as the mountains, and to have knowledge beyond what humans can fathom. They have their own tales, passed down with the wind and plants and clouds. Sometimes, they're seen as spirits just like the mountains, with powers that can harness their strength and wisdom, or just one singular spirit with immense ability to make life and destroy it as well. You look at these coyotes, all blurred into one indistinguishable collection of eyes. You think, maybe, they could all be of one mind, one soul. And then, as you drive, you look up at the branches overhead with the moon peeking through. You see ravens gathered in the trees, their black feathers blending in with the shadows around them. You roll down your windows and hear them calling out to one another, creating something that is almost a melody. In Native American mythology of the Pacific Northwest, ravens are also often ageless spirits, taking the form of humans, animals, and even objects. Other legends tell of the raven at the north end of the world, who pecks out people's eyes and feeds them to the greatest and most terrifying of all beings, a bear-like monster covered in eyes and mouths. It's known as the man-eater, and it and the raven live at the top of a mountain. Nobody can hide from them. They can see and hear all. Ravens also can have immense powers of creation, and are said to have released the sun, moon, and stars from the tiny box they were trapped in to make the first day. Other stories tell of them spreading their wings to create the land and sea. As you watch them soar overhead on top of the stars and the Milky Way, you suddenly feel very old, as if something is coursing through you and through them and through the forces all around you that existed when the earth was first formed. There are other creatures in the dark woods of the Cascades as well, and other tales to go along with them. Many of these are tall tales invented by lumberjacks of the area, who would swap stories when traveling between camps and disseminate myths across the region. These tales almost always featured animals called fearsome critters that are said to inhabit the areas around logging camps. Many fearsome critters were simply products of exaggeration, but others were used jokingly or seriously as explanations for unexplained natural phenomena. The splinter cat is a fierce nocturnal feline that can fly through the air. It knocks the branches off trees to expose hiding prey and leaves trunks standing alone like ghosts. These branchless trees can be seen throughout the Pacific Northwest. The hide-behind, perhaps more threatening, can never be seen by the human eye due to its ability to perfectly hide behind any tree, bush, or other object. It is a shadowy, enormous creature that is completely silent, and it's blamed for the disappearances of loggers who never returned to camp. Dawn begins to break on the road ahead of you, and you watch the ravens take to the sky and leave their perches. The world becomes yellow and pink and light. You're glad it's getting lighter outside. Anything could be hiding in the deep forests you're still passing through. Native Americans and lumberjacks also tell stories about wild, hairy men and ape-like beings. These creatures all have different names and different origins, but the term Sasquatch has stuck and has permeated the folklore surrounding creatures like this all across the country. Sometimes, these creatures have special abilities such as invisibility or strength. Sometimes, they simply wander through the tall hills and trees, disappearing into the seemingly infinite mountain ranges beyond where humans can possibly find them. Often, the Sasquatch has an ability to blend in seamlessly with trees and bark. Although Sasquatch-like creatures have been seen all over America, the Pacific Northwest has by far the largest number of sightings, and today the Sasquatch, or Bigfoot, continues to live at the center of folklore here, as it has for as long as anyone can remember. The trees and the mountains and the big people said to exist alongside them, and the sun tinting everything gold as it rises on the horizon hidden by the landscape, all make you feel like the land here is taller, grander, than any you've ever seen before. If Bigfoot could exist anywhere, it would be here. Your car feels like it's soaring right into the sunrise. The world is wide. It seems almost divine. Right now, you're in Western Oregon, in the center of the Cascades, surrounded by national forest after national forest, Siuslaw, Willamette, Mount Hood. Interstate 5, which stretches down to Mexico and up to Canada, passes through this area on its way to Portland. But the road you're taking through the mountains is quieter, without big signs or the roar of traffic. You pass through small town after small town, shrouded by lofty, imposing pine trees and waterfalls. The town you're in right now is called Millersburg, and according to the small sign you pass, its population is less than 900. Millersburg, obscure and not thought of by many, has a myth of its own, one that few mention today, but that is still as mystifying as it was decades ago. It dominated headlines and saw more people visit the town than ever before, and most likely again. Some people think it's another Sasquatch sighting in the middle of the mountains, like so many others. But some think its origin is much further away, outside of Oregon and the West Coast and even the planet. In the center of Millersburg, its banks overgrown with age, is Conser Lake. It's sheltered from outside viewers by blackberry bushes and tall grass and wild thistles. Unless you're looking for it, it's almost impossible to find. But in the 1960s, Conser Lake was a beautiful, relaxing spot and easily accessible to visitors. It was a time when news spread quickly down Old Salem Road, which connected neighbors through the mountains. This made what happened in 1960 a phenomenon almost too large, too otherworldly, for the small communities it happened to. It all started when the driver of a mint truck traveling through Millersburg saw a tall, white, gorilla-like creature running alongside the truck and peering through the window. Soon after, a couple driving by the lake also noticed a white figure keeping pace with their car. Around the same time, it was said a flying saucer had crashed into the lake. Some report an object, and others just report a bright light pulsing in the sky, and then rapidly coming closer and closer until it sank beneath the surface of the water. Then, in late July on a Sunday night, the monster returned. Several teenagers from the nearby town of Albany were walking alongside the lake and heard a loud noise, too loud, they said, to be from a human being. They turned and saw a tall white creature running toward them. They hid in a bush as it ran past them, yelling in a high-pitched voice. Later, they described it to the sheriff as a polar bear or gorilla with pointed ears and shaggy fur. When the sheriff returned to the lake, he caught a glimpse of the creature standing by a tree. The story broke over the radio 3 days later. Hundreds of people flocked to the lake at night, trying to catch a glimpse, and a few claimed that they were successful. The sheriff found himself constantly responding to calls from frightened citizens. Then, in early August, reporter Betty Westby went to the lake at 3:30 a.m. with a group of friends and nothing else but a flashlight. As they walked, they heard frogs croaking. They'd been told that the frogs quieted down when the monster was near. An hour later, near dawn, Westby and her friends began to feel that they were being watched, as if something was crouching on the hillside. Several members of the group ran to the car and jumped inside. Later, Westby says this must have startled the creature. She heard a huge crashing in the brush as something ran toward the trees on the upper end of the lake. A boy, around Westby's age, appeared a few seconds later, holding a rifle in his hands. "You're looking for it too," he said. Westby nodded. "I have to show you something." The boy brought her to a series of huge footprints, spaced 6 or 7 feet apart. Inside one of the impressions was Westby's shoe print. Ahead of the prints were smashed down trees and other underbrush that had been torn to shreds. After the incident, Westby decided that her mission would be to report on the monster. She published an initial article about her encounter, and people began telling her about their own sightings: fishermen who had to be hospitalized for shock, hikers seeing the monster across the lake in broad daylight, passers-by who caught a glimpse of it running through the woods or crouching behind rocks. But in her articles, Westby described the creature as a peaceful humanoid who wanted to cause no harm. She wrote that violence was the natural reaction of the creature at bay. If we found ourselves on a strange planet or in a foreign country, with every hand turned against us, we would flee when pursued and fight when cornered. If this is an extraterrestrial creature from some faraway star, then we do little to turn a hostile face toward it. Around this time, a local claiming to be a telepath stepped forward and claimed that the monster didn't like to be called a monster. Westby went with the telepath to the lake at night, where they attempted to mentally ask the creature what it would rather be called. The telepath claimed to receive an answer: visitor. She added that the creature couldn't explain where it was from. "I'm not sure you could understand. It's hard to put it into Earth terms." And then, the creature communicated that it had to flee. It said, "They're chasing me again. I mean no harm. Goodbye, friend. Come back. I'm lonely." At this point, Westby heard the pounding of heavy feet on the ridge above, fading into the distance. Soon after, a group of young people with rifles appeared through the trees, just as the visitor had said they would. Later, large footprints were found in the area where Westby and the telepath had stood. Throughout the rest of the year, Westby continued to discourage people from trying to find or kill the monster, but attempts continued. She also gathered over 20 more first-hand accounts, but over the years, stories of the creature slowly quieted. Today, Concert Lake is privately owned and almost inaccessible, meaning the monster's whereabouts may forever remain a mystery. But what does that mean? Is the visitor still there? Did it die? Or did something return to take it back to its home beyond the stars? You find yourself walking down a tall hill, surrounded by ledges and rocks and trees. You know the lake is nearby. You bend back blackberry branches and carefully walk through soft mud and green grass. There are thorns and vines and boulders, and you climb over them as you make your way further and further down to the flat, still waters of the lake. You see it, finally, surrounded perfectly by mountains piercing the blue sky, seemingly in the center of everything. It is completely pristine. You know nobody has been here in years. The wind blows softly, creating small ripples in the water. It seems empty, but you know underneath there must be something living, growing, continuing to keep the lake centered in this vast mountain range. You think to yourself, if you're here, I won't hurt you. I just want to know. The wind picks up. You hear what sounds like a branch cracking and falling far away. Was it finally falling after years of just barely hanging on? You close your eyes and listen for footsteps or the call of an animal. Nothing. The sunlight reflects off the surface of the lake and creates patterns through the leaves above you. You look back at the water, still silent and pristine, one last time. What happened here all those years ago? And why at that time, in this place? How did so many people see the thing that they saw? You climb up the hill, leaving Concert Lake behind, alone by itself, with the sun shining through the dark trees. As you drive away, you think about being little and sitting in the back seat of your family's car. You had always imagined a creature, sometimes physical and sometimes made of mist and shadow, running alongside the car as you drove. It would dodge traffic and other obstacles, jump over signs, and keep up with you no matter how fast you went. You look out the window next to you, half expecting the white creature to be there. The road is empty, but you wonder if there's ever been any truth to these creatures you always pictured. You know you're not the only one who's seen them, and Bigfoot sightings all across the country entail similar experiences. Seeing something big, something almost human, running alongside your car, keeping pace, too blurry and unknowable to ever identify. But you, as far as you can tell, are completely alone. You merge back onto Interstate 5, driving further up the Cascades, closer to the ocean, focusing your eyes on the road ahead of you. As Interstate 5 takes you further and further north, you feel more and more suspended from reality. The sun begins to lower in the sky again, and you think you see the stars start to come out. The stars look different here too. You pass through McMinnville, where one of the most famous UFO photographs was taken on a farm in 1950. The photograph is of a metallic, disc-shaped object. It's hovering silently over a small house and a huge, mountainous landscape. To this day, nobody can explain what the photograph is of. You look back up at the stars, and you think that they're brighter, closer. It's golden hour. It looks like the lights above you are moving, pulsing, reaching down to Earth. Are they stars? Are they something else entirely? Further north, a pilot named Kenneth Arnold famously saw 9 shiny objects flying over Mount Rainier in 1947. This initiated a UFO craze that spurred the U.S. government's first formal UFO investigation project. The sky darkens, and the lights above you become brighter, more vibrant, blue and green and pink. You think maybe you hear them, humming to one another across the sky that is beginning to come to life. You pass big glowing signs telling you that you're nearing Portland, and you slowly begin to see the lights of buildings and cars and streets in the distance. You can't remember the last time you saw a real city. And the lights, the unknown pieces of the universe above you, seem to reach down to the bright buildings, whispering secrets and bits of the future to the people living there. You get dinner in Portland. It's strange to be in a restaurant again, even a small one, surrounded by so many people. The last time you did this, you were on the other end of the country. You realize how accustomed you've become to being alone with your own thoughts. That night, you walk through the city, looking up at the stars and wondering if anyone else can see the same shimmering lights as you, trailing down from the black sky and blending in with the glow of the city. And in the morning you drive to the coast, through more mountains where mist rises from the ocean below. In the furthest northwest corner of Oregon, you can find some of the oldest settlements in the country west of the Mississippi. They're beach towns, where loud winds blow and fog creeps in from the sea, making everything soft and pale. You drive through Seaside, an old town that sounds peaceful and a little distant. You pass a big wooden sign with Seaside written on it in blue over a painted sunrise. There are plenty of hidden secrets in this town, but they're hard to find, almost as if they've been swept under the carpet. There are old, faded buildings with wooden exteriors and pale white paint peeling off their sides. Many of these old buildings have upstairs areas that are completely unused and that everyone agrees are just a little bit haunted. For almost 100 years, Seaside's centerpiece was an old hotel, the Seasider. It was an immense, grand building surrounded by beautiful stone walls, pastel-colored signs, and perfectly white balconies. Over the years, workers have mentioned seeing figures reflected in mirrors that they cannot see when they turn around, and dark orbs and shadows floating through floorboards and beneath doors. Down the street, Girdle's restaurant has a notorious flying coffee pot and inherited several employees of the Seasider after it was torn down. Some employees report seeing the same shadows walking behind doors and the same faces in the mirrors. And on the beaches of Seaside, where it rains more often than not, people see glimpses of apparitions coming in from the ocean, whistling in the wind. Near Seaside are the towns of Manzanita and Wheeler, both shrouded in the same mists and mysteries. Manzanita sits directly under Neocani Mountain, which has a long history of legends and buried treasures. On its beaches are mysterious piles of stones that appear overnight and have for decades. No one has ever figured out who is responsible, creating speculation of an otherworldly artist. Wheeler is home to the Old Wheeler Hotel, known for its spirit orbs, small glowing white lights ghost hunters have frequently photographed near its basement. But townspeople in Wheeler also talk of well-meaning spirits, known as the good spirits of Wheeler. Wheeler's many bookshop owners sometimes say their stores are a sort of spiritual vortex, and locals all point to something called a Wheeler moment, or a pleasant, happy coincidence that pops up and assists someone in some way. They all have their own stories where someone wanted to accomplish a goal, and some strangely coincidental opportunity or person arose that helped things along. And so you decide you want to visit Wheeler and meet the good spirits. Wheeler has antique stores on every corner, surrounded by seashells and small gardens. You enter a bookstore to try to feel the spirits, and read books of poetry about the sea as you stare at it, the palest blue you can imagine, out the window. And then you walk out to the shore and put your feet in the Pacific. You have made it to the edge of the country. You smell the air and listen to the gulls. Around you, people are walking dogs on the sand and flying kites. You stand in the ocean, the tides rolling over your feet, watching birds fly over the waves until you can't see them anymore. It's peaceful here. You think you can almost feel the spirits too, in the shells by your feet and the tracks in the sand, and the pebbles that have fallen from the mountains all around you. You want to stay here. Not forever, not even for long, but you do. The tide rolls in and leaves sea glass by your feet, clear and soft and a color you can't name. You pick it up and walk back to your car, holding your shoes in your other hand. The sand is warm, and the sun begins to sink in the sky. You will find somewhere to sleep tonight where you can see the ocean, hear the gulls, look at the lights in the sky, still pulsing and humming and reaching down to the earth, reminding you that there is so much you still do not know, and tomorrow you will drive more. Supernatural Road Trip is written by Catherine Horowitz. Information comes from the Oregon Bigfoot Database, Haunted Oregon by Andy Weeks, Ancestral Findings, legendsofamerica.com, The Climb, and Esri Online Mapping. Music is by American Moon Bicycle, Fiel, Sketchbook 2, and Cold Case.
Cryptid Girl Summer!